A long time ago, in a small village, something happened that forced the entire village to live in fear. At first, the village was completely normal. Sometimes people fell sick, but life was going on peacefully. Then one day, the villagers discovered a strange idol under an old tree. The idol had no legs, and its ears were unusually large. Soon, a village meeting was held. Everyone thought it might be an ancient idol. Maybe there was once a temple there that had been destroyed over time. Finally, the villagers decided that the idol should be worshipped. As soon as the worship began, the village started changing. The thefts stopped. Sick people began to recover. Everyone believed that some divine blessing had come to the village. But this peace did not last long. Some time later, a wandering monk arrived in the village. He was traveling. But the moment he reached the tree, he felt that something was terribly wrong. The monk carefully examined the idol, but he could not understand who it belonged to. He checked the scriptures he carried with him. He opened ancient texts and read sacred mantras. But there was no mention of this idol anywhere. No god, no spirit, no known being. The monk became worried and told the village chief, "I have searched all my scriptures, but there is no mention of this idol, and the things that are not written in sacred texts are rarely good." But because everything in the village seemed to be going well, the chief ignored his warning. A few days later, the chief had a terrifying dream. In the dream, he saw people from the village hanging from the tree. Then suddenly, a demon appeared before him. The demon had round white eyes and a weak human-like body. The chief woke up in fear, but he convinced himself it was just a nightmare. The next morning, shocking news spread through the village. 5 members of one family had died. No one knew how. A few days later, the chief had the same dream again. But this time, the demon looked more powerful and more terrifying. Now he saw 4 members of another family hanging from the tree. And the next morning, they were found dead as well. Now the chief was certain that this was not just a dream. He immediately went to the monk and told him everything. He explained how the same demon appeared in his dreams and how every time someone died in the village afterward. The monk finally understood the truth. He said, "This idol does not belong to any god. It belongs to a demon, and your worship is making it stronger." The villagers quickly decided that the idol must be buried back into the ground. They performed prayers, rituals, and a sacred fire ceremony. Then they buried the idol beneath the tree. For some time, the village became peaceful again. But the fear never truly disappeared. One day, the villagers noticed strange marks on the ground near the buried idol. It looked as if something beneath the earth was trying to come out. And then one morning, the villagers saw the idol again. It had come back out of the ground, and now everyone in the village knew. This was no longer something they could control. When the demon idol was discovered again in the village, panic spread instantly. Without wasting any time, the entire village gathered at the central square that same evening. Saints were called. The elders were asked for advice. But even after hours of discussion, no one could find a solution. Then one of the saints finally spoke in a serious tone. "You people have awakened this idol by performing rituals. Maybe worship may bring peace for a short time. But remember one thing. This is the idol of a demon. And such idols never bring a good ending." As soon as those words were spoken, a deep silence fell over the entire village. After a long discussion, the villagers decided that until they found a proper solution, someone would guard the idol at all times. And if anything strange happened, the entire village would be informed immediately. On the first day, the duty was given to a farmer. He was a simple, hard-working man. For the first week, nothing unusual happened. No sounds, no movement. The idol remained exactly the same, silent and lifeless. But on the 8th night, during his watch, the farmer accidentally fell asleep. In his dream, he saw something terrifying. The idol was no longer a statue. Instead, a living demon was sitting in its place, staring directly at him and slowly smiling. The farmer woke up in fear. His heart was pounding loudly. With trembling courage, he looked toward the idol again. But the statue was still there, silent, lifeless, exactly the same as before. But after that night, a strange fear settled deep inside the farmer's heart, as if something terrible had already begun. And now, it could no longer be stopped. A few days later, chaos suddenly spread across the village. The priest's young son suddenly collapsed to the ground. There were no injuries on his body. He had never been sick before. Yet slowly, blood began to flow from his mouth. Terrified villagers immediately carried the boy to the temple. Saints were called again. The priest began performing rituals. Incense was lit. Sacred lamps were placed. Holy Ganga water was sprinkled throughout the temple, and ancient mantras were recited. Then one of the saints spoke in a grave voice. These are not ordinary mantras. They are taken from ancient scriptures. They may weaken an evil force, but only for a short time. For a moment, hope returned to the temple. People believed that maybe everything would be all right now. But with every passing moment, the boy's breathing became slower and slower. All night long, the saints and the priest kept trying, but nothing worked. The chant slowly faded, and in that deep silence, the boy's breathing stopped as well. A heavy silence filled the temple, and in that moment, everyone realized how helpless they truly were.
Now, no one in the village had any doubt. Everyone understood that the idol was not just stone. And they also knew that the villagers, pandits, and saints were completely helpless in front of it. The fear had increased so much that as soon as the sun set, everyone stayed inside their homes. Doors and windows were locked. No one wanted to be alone. The streets of the village were silent. But it didn't feel normal. There was a strange, unseen fear in the air. Days passed and the fear kept growing. Now people were afraid not just of the night, but also of the morning. Because death was no longer coming in dreams, it was happening in broad daylight. At this point, the village head made a final decision. He sent a message to the king and asked for help. The king knew the village head, so he immediately sent his most trusted advisor. It took the advisor a week to reach the village, but before he arrived, 3 more children suddenly fell ill. There were no injuries and no signs of disease. They were just slowly losing their breath. The village head explained everything to the advisor, from finding the idol to all the deaths that followed. The pandits and saints were also there. Now there was no fear on their faces, only tiredness and helplessness. The advisor tried to think of a solution, but nothing was clear. Just then, one sage said, "If there is a solution to this idol, it is not in this village." The temple became completely silent. Then the sage continued, "In the neighboring kingdom, there are sages who know certain techniques. Maybe they can identify this idol." The advisor quickly sent a message to the king. The king ordered those sages to be brought to the village. After many days, one evening, some movement was seen outside the village. A few figures were slowly coming closer. As they came near, it became clear that the sages had arrived. But as soon as they saw the idol, their expressions changed. One of them said quietly, "We know whose idol this is." The sage stood in front of the idol for a while. His body did not move, but his eyes seemed to observe everything. The temple was completely silent. After a few moments, the sage said, "This is not the first time this idol has appeared in a village." The people standing in the temple became more alert. The sage continued, "A long time ago, in another village in Rajasthan, a similar demon idol was found. At first, people thought it was just an old stone, but slowly their behavior began to change, and over time they started worshipping the idol." The sage paused for a moment. Then he said, "The day people started worshipping that idol, the downfall of that village also began. First, people started falling ill. Then fires began to break out in homes. And after that, bloodshed started in the village. The people in the temple grew more tense." The sage continued, "Within a short time, the entire village was abandoned. But the influence of that demon did not stop there. Slowly, its effect started spreading beyond the village. Conflicts began at the borders. People grew weaker. The king's army started losing battles. The advisor then asked, 'What did the king do after that?' The sage replied, 'After that, a great war took place. Many soldiers died just to remove that idol, and many never returned.' The sage continued, 'In the end, the king made a difficult decision. The idol was taken to the Himalayas and placed in a location where there was no village, no temple, and most importantly, no one to worship it. The temple fell silent again. The village head remained quiet for a moment, then asked respectfully, "If the idol was placed there, how did it reach our village?" The sage looked at the idol again and said, "Either someone has brought it back from there, or someone has once again started worshipping it." The village head paused, then asked, "What should we do now?" The sage looked at the idol and said, "Only one word: sacrifice." The sage said, "Sacrifice will be necessary." Hearing this, the entire council fell silent. The village head asked, "What kind of sacrifice?" The sage replied, "The sacrifice of the entire village." Everyone was shocked. The sage continued, "The last time this idol caused trouble, it did not affect just one village. The entire region suffered. Many people died and fear spread everywhere. If we stay here this time, the damage will be even greater. That is why leaving the village is the only safe option." After this, the council was divided into two groups. Some people said saving lives is most important. Others said running away out of fear is wrong. Some wanted to leave because they had no other choice. They were only thinking about their families. No decision could be made. Meanwhile, one of the 3 sick children died. This news spread across the village. After that, people quietly started leaving. There was no help from the king either. Now only the priest, the village head, and the sage were left, trying to think of a solution. The priest was already broken from inside because his son had died due to the idol. In anger and grief, he made a wrong decision. That night, while everyone was asleep, the priest went near the idol. He was holding a large stone in his hands. He did not chant anything. He did not pray. He simply struck the idol and broke it. By morning, everyone came to know about it. People became even more afraid. Everyone felt something very wrong was about to happen. That night, the village head had a terrible dream. He saw the priest in the dream. A demon was sitting on his shoulder. The demon said nothing, but its eyes were fixed on him. The next day, the village head told the sage about the dream. The sage's face turned pale. He said, "By breaking the idol, the priest has set the demon free. The idol was the only thing that was holding it." The village head asked, "What should we do now?" The sage replied, "Now nothing can be done. The breaking of the idol has removed the only restraint. No prayer and no remedy will work now." People say that within a few days the entire village was abandoned. Even today, the land remains empty. No one lives there, and no one dares to go there. The story ends here, but the fear begins from this point. The idol was broken, and with it, the restraint was broken too. The demon was set free, and the village became just a memory. People say that soon after, all the houses were left empty. The land turned barren. Even today, no one lives there and no one dares to visit. That is why, even now, outside the village, it is written, "The Cursed Village."